start with the preamble.
Sure. Well, I thought the blue was evocative, and it gave the idea of the interior, because that was actually the first question I asked myself is how is the blue functioning, because it's such an overt decision or such a clear, marker in a piece. And I sort of thought, well, perhaps it's signaling for quiet interior space, nighttime, solitude, all of those things. And those weren't words I came up with, but as I looked at it, it sort of reinforced the solitude of the gestures, the interiority of the subject going inside and sort of signing for that process with these abstract movements. I did not look at the statement until afterwards because I just wanted the piece to work on me without any other kind of influence. But I had an inkling of where it was going because of her past work. But it had a very calming effect. I'm glad of the movement and so forth. I was a little curious why sometimes the lighting came up and then it came down, but I sort of figure, okay, that's just what it is for that particular scene.
I wish we could have the work you have here going on before and after where you're headed with your project. Because I was really excited to see how it turned out compared to the stills. So I'm really happy to see you step back from being overt about your animal symbolism. And you were kind of referencing like elephants and things like this, but you had taken your project to become a very literal direction. You had an elephant mask. You were posing with the trunk, these arms of the trunk. But here, we still get the benefit of all that, but we get to discover those possibilities versus you just telling us this is an elephant. So, just a huge amount of improvement. So, I know you were stressed out if you could pull it off. But it should just be a lesson that you can. And you knew something was wrong before and you just took care of it.
Yeah, if I can say, I've got the elephant, now I need to let the elephant out of the bag. It did not encourage me to contemplate. And one thing about this piece is I am more encouraged to contemplate and let my mind wander. So, and I think that's also because of the fluidity of the movement, the pace, the quietness. It's a very quiet piece. And so even though you're very active, there's still a certain kind of quiet to it, which lets my mind, to a certain degree, wander. So it's much more effective than that literal interpretation. This is one of the really good examples of when an abstraction is much, much more effective and meaningful than a figurative work. I mean, a specific figurative piece, like a literal piece.
I think this is a really good example of the kind of really common problem where you have thinking and you have the work, and that's what the pictures were. And here, those things are both together, and that's what art's supposed to be. Too often there's this kind of division between conceptualization and whatever the material and process of the work allows for. And I think that's echoing what Kyle said. Maybe that's a really important lesson here. For me, the weak part of this work is the framing. And I know we talked about it and we had all these reasons why it was such as it was, but given if it wasn't a last minute production, which obviously it was, that I would have redone the whole thing with a little more generous framing and more given the kind of proportions of the screen, a lot more attention to the space above and below and all those. But I like the blue and the lighting. I mean, there's a few points where the lighting's a bit weird, but they disappear really quick.
Todd had mentioned being kind of unclear about the lighting changes, but kind of liking them and accepting them. I think you just need to be more assertive about the differences. If you really want this one to be, like reflect a kind of brighter moment or mood, then really go brighter. Here it's kind of like, did you just not get your exposure right, or is it intentional? So I just want to feel it being intentional a little bit more, so I don't question that. Why did it get dark? Is it a technical problem? Also, this is just a general thing for video people that our school has a DVD player. So when you compress your DVD, we lose a lot of quality. Nowadays, people are using these little media players. You just plug in like a little flash card, and that you've put a high-res file on, full HD, that these things can handle. Probably, it's just the DVD players don't play that well. The compression is really high, the resolution is really low.
It's not HD.
It's not HD, and on top of that, it's really compressed.
It's like a JPEG.
A bad JPEG, yeah. And so the media players just give much higher quality. And I can't remember the prices, but they're pretty affordable. There's these little things that plug into here.
Like that kind of moment visually, you really utilize the frame well, and it's just a beautiful moment.
That one works really well in the frame.
And I love the stillness of it. It's like, and I like that it's video, but it's a still shot, and it's very. And here, you're utilizing it, but other time anyway.
Yeah.
Sometimes you really hit it, and sometimes not so close.
Yeah. You should look at Robert Wilson's work on YouTube. And I can't remember the series, but he takes often like these famous people and he does these still videos of them where there's just little bits of change over time. And it's sort of like a moving portrait in a way. Robert.
That's pretty much it.
Robert, what's that?
No, I'm sorry, just 30 seconds.
30 seconds, yeah.
For references, there's a film work by Tacita Dean that's Merce Cunningham performing John Cage's Silence, which is actually it's in 3 movements. Nobody remembers that, but and it's just like 3 very, very small gestures over 4 minutes and 33 seconds. That's also. I think that's probably also available on. I think you can see that on the internet. Okay, time's up. Thank you. So let's go over here to Carol. I'm going to say something that I've said that I've heard before. We had this discussion about numbers and all that, and I think, regardless of the interested individual pictures and their qualities and that, I think it's a kind of project, and the way it's described in the statement, that really requires the viewer to see many more pictures. And I think maybe, given economics and all that, if we would have come up to this problem earlier, it would have been more beneficial to have 6 small ones than 3 big ones, just for example. Because I do like the relationship of what you say you're interested in and the kind of evidence of the picture, but I think you're casting a pretty wide net with this statement, and the pictures are not really fulfilling the
It got me to think, because of hearing of what went into decisions that you made about framing it, got me to think, well, my gosh, why can't we just show the work, period? What about this convention of framing? Is there a way to rethink it to make it appropriate? So that Wolfgang Tillman was able to rethink that so that it was just the paper and the viewer, the viewer coming in contact with the material photograph. So you might want to think about how you can make that apparent. I mean, more so than just push pinning, but that there's a clear reasoning, or that you reasoned it. But I think that there are other ways of presentation than mounting and framing that still maintain the integrity of the work. Perhaps there's a certain kind of understatement without the frame and without the mounting and so forth that could enhance the work. something to think about. However, I know in this context, so we can talk about that when we get to Eric, because I think he just is dealing with the material of it and just presenting it cleanly, so it's not an issue. We saw, oh look, there's a system. He created a system. The system seems to be economical, but it works. It doesn't get in the way. So now the photos. Yeah, photos are great. And yeah, I'd like more also to.
Maybe more text too. It seems to be that kind of work. I mean, you're doing reading on this thing, and I really like the idea of this kind of little thing about nature's thought, and that's just really evocative, and that really directs us to think about what you're showing us in an interesting way. So maybe you're really touching on like an image text piece there's a more appropriate form for that.
Yeah, I'm kind of echoing comments already. I felt really strongly myself. There needs to be more pictures. They can be smaller. I don't need them so big and all this white space around them. Because that's sort of trying to make, especially because there's few, and then they're presented so wonderfully here. It makes me think that you're more just interested in formal relationships, tone, color.
It privileges that.
Yeah. But then I read this, so much more interesting. But then I try and go through and understand your words by looking at your images, and it just doesn't bear out. I get hints of it, but I get led astray by other things, and I don't get enough chance to find the evidence. Yeah, I definitely would encourage you to continue with this idea, and it seems like something that, you probably need a lot of time on, just to go out and find all that, the right images for it.
But I agree with Mark that a text in relationship to the image would fill out the work even more, and also would alleviate you from the burden of framing, because it could be the relationship of the photograph and the text. And so they do it, it is paper and the text is on paper, and you can work that relationship out. But just, it would be nice, especially if it's compact and so forth. You might think about that.
In terms of titles, or text titles, could help you. There's this really amazing artist named Mark Riddell. I don't know. You might want to check out some of his work.
Spell it.
It's impossible.
R-O-O.
All that aside, I think this picture is worth paying attention to, because when you think about what the text sets up, or your statement rather, those two pictures sort of follow that. The logic is really clear. That picture is a bit more ambiguous, which makes it more interesting, because again, it sort of widens the possibility of what this thing might mean and how it manifests. I mean, that could just be garbage, but because of the way you've set up the work, I keep thinking that's like some collapsed shelter or something. It has this thing that it's more than a piece of hardware, and the light is very weird too. It's just a grabber.
And there's this weirdness from the poem. It's, to me, this is the most poetic of the three, and it's the most emotional. And it's the relationship of the architecture and just the depth and the inequality of the plants, so that they're about, they're losing their lives slowly as the life has already been lost. But it's a really wonderful, I found that to be a really nice dialogue that the plants were having with the architecture.
Yeah, and the people up on the hill. Yeah, and that almost seems the most sort of like lush and developed, and as we get lower and lower, this gets stripped down. So it's like this hierarchy just through elevation in the landscape.
And you could be poetic if you can let your mind, you can play around and let your mind wander, like with comments like that to guide the viewer. Maybe it doesn't make it to the final edit, but it doesn't have to be a dry text. It could be a text that's part objective and part subject.
It's like Amanda's work. We talked about like what Mark mentioned, like the art versus the thinking or something, and yeah, having that. We want to find evidence in your text, but you got to do even more than that somehow. You bring whatever that art moment is into the work. Allow for a kind of slippage or an expansion of the idea.
I want to say one quick thing that maybe You don't see that if you're looking for that. See? Okay, let's go. Thank you.
I'm taken by what I see also, what I see as a certain kind of binary, A to B. And I mean because of the way this photograph is shrouded in black and the way this is all sort of beige and light, they just tonally, I like this relationship because it creates a dialogue and a comparison and a difference, and it asks the viewer, oh wait, this is to that, or you know, this I see this kind of a thing happening. What the reading of the face is really wonderful because it's your face, the expression of the face is so defiant. It's kind of confrontational with the viewer, and it sets up this very bold statement. And here, we know that that's the same subject, yet the face is read as more open, as the possibility to invite the viewer in, you know, because the viewer is saying, you can come in here if you dare, you know, but in this, you're going, no, contemplate, you're welcoming the viewer. And so I like that there's all of these subtle relationships and conflicts, you know, that within the photograph. Of course, all the signs, there's contradictions of signs within contradictions of signs, and so like all the signs of gender just flipping and flipping and flipping. And the circularity, when I come here, just what you're reading to here, that, and the phallus points back down, like here, or the dildo just points back down, dildo / phallus points back down, and just go in this circle. But it was funny, I had my students here yesterday. Sorry, I showed too much. A decidedly quiet lot. And so I thought that, of course, I
know those.
Capital punishment, not capital, what is the other kind of punishment? Corporal, yes, corporal punishment should come back to college. So I thought for sure I'm going to get a healthy dialogue when they come to here. And there was this silence, and I thought, well, doesn't it even, you know, shock you a little bit or put your head back? No. And then finally I was able to pull some teeth. But anyway, I'm glad that you investigate the subject as you did.
I appreciate the investigation as well, and I really like that you made this one life size. Wow. Oh. Am I wrong? So investigation of gender, and I see some sort of flipping this through like maybe like kind of more female makeup, but that almost reminds me of like kabuki theater where men are painted as women. So that's kind of interesting. But you seem to almost be obeying another kind of code of gender behavior, a little bit like the Butch code. And I wonder if that is not sort of has its own limits as well, as much as sort of our heterosexual kind of codes of male and female. So the contradictions I find in there, I almost find I'm a bit almost overwhelmed by it. It sort of begins to a different aesthetic. I could be totally wrong. A different sort of code of being. What I'm most interested in is like the use of this picture again over here, and what that started to say about. I wasn't sure, but like kind of just like layers of representation. So I sort of saw this as an image being created, not as a person. Usually when we see a photograph of a person, we just think it's the person, but here you're making a statement that it's the image. This is a designed image, you know, stylized based on this content. So here you're making a point of it, and then we see another one. Here you're also still made up a bit, still kind of working out sort of gender codes, and then this other kind of image, or sort of the book image, another kind of layer of representation or ideas. So I kind of saw you really kind of sort of separating out gender from the person somehow, kind of stripping that out as image, as visual codes, as signs.
External to the subject.
Yeah, it's down to the sun. Yeah, I don't know. Like, is this you, or is this you, or is this you?
Or yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Did you know how the fingers work? That's my favorite thing. Didn't see that. That's a gift. It's sort of like reinforcing Todd's read of the circularity of the balance point thing. But that's just sort of doing that.
Oh,
Why is this here? Can I ask you?
I was pretty much trying not to repeat that image. I still wanted it to go back and forth. I still wanted it to be this like kind of like an icon. Is it a person who is being looked up to? Is being kind of not idolized but mimicked, maybe investigated by that person?
You know, seeing it, to be honest, I didn't think of this when we were looking at Bill, and regardless of Todd's calling attention to that, how that activates, we're sort of kind of reading, what if this one didn't have the overt codes and that was yet another sort of more of an in-between? Which I think, maybe it's just one more layer, and it's kind of mirroring things.
I mean, you mentioned in here, you know, that these behaviors produce an appearance, you know, of a natural sort of being. I guess that's kind of the idea that I'm thinking of. Like this is just exists as kind of image or appearance of gender. You know, I'm just curious about the idea. Like, what if we never performed these things? Like, what would happen?
but I think what she's getting to is that because of culture, we're always performing it, either consciously or unconsciously. So that's what I was getting from. That's what I was getting from that. Is that this performativity, this active performing gender, isn't a conscious fact, and I think that the photographs are trying to make it so. Or at least that's how I was interacting with it.
I feel like it's reinforcing image to me. I mean, they're literally images on a wall. This is like, that can't be more literal than telling me that's image. It's not image, not substance, so to speak. So I don't know. I wonder.
Do you think it's possible that they're actually working their way contrary to intention?
Possibly, yeah. It's almost a bit, possibly missing some complexity to the idea. And I even think it might be even rooted in your quote as well. As wonderful and thought-provoking, I'm sure, as the reading is, there might be, taking out of context, there might be oversimplifying the idea in my mind as a viewer, or maybe even in your mind as an artist. What about performance versus image? For you? Like, would you consider that? Performing versus making an image?
Yes.
No.
But that's because that is a performance, and so is this, but so is this.
Well, this is the art I have here. This is a photograph.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm talking about like actually like when you come here and there would be a performance.
As the form of the
Yeah.
body.
Yeah.
I don't understand the question.
You know, the performance art.
Yeah.
Would you consider making a performance art piece instead of a photo?
Oh, I don't know. That's like another line. I feel that's because this work is really personal for me.
Yeah.
Stepping onto a stage like that, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know that far yet.
But it's cool. I already feel like you stepped on quite a stage.
Yeah.
You know? So I think it's pretty cool where it already is. But I'm just thinking like next levels and kind of how it might mix up this read of it being just an image.
Our times have gone up, but you know, I knew some people did a lot of performance in the early '80s, and then they talked about it. None of them had theatrical personalities. The discomfort was what they were working with.
No, it's like wonderfully striking when you're coming into a gallery and seeing the show, and it's like, oh, I haven't seen photographs like that. Like this relationship, it really intrigued me. Kind of at it further. It works really nice as a sculptural project. Probably the part that then was a bit lacking was as I approached it, really looking for it to resolve. So it seemed like a good premise for something, and then this kind of a solution or a conclusion I might come to as I read the art. I couldn't quite resolve it very much from it. Like seeing how these kind of related to each other somehow or projected onto something. This surface here seems unresolved. And your statement talked about change happening. So is that the change of what we have a picture of, or is it the picture themselves?
Well, actually, the triangle itself, chemistry, the triangle itself is changed with the symbol for it. Then also, it's basically immediately turned to something else, and then this something else turning into something else. So these pieces that were made, the broken pieces, I actually made them for a specific reason. So it was almost kind of like a part for sake part.
Well, the level of complexity is such in this work that I think we need as little distractions as possible so that we can kind of let our minds wander. And for me, that podium placed right there was a really big distraction because it starts including it in the weed of the work, and I couldn't get, when I first saw it, I didn't just see this pure form, I saw this form in relationship to this form. And that colored my reading of it. And I know objectively that that's not part of the work, but visually they create a relationship that that was always being considered either consciously or unconsciously. And so, or I was trying to exercise it when I looked at the work. And so then the only time I could get rid of it is here, but I couldn't get rid of it, it starts coming into the work again. So, may I? Wow, it has much more power and much more presence now, and then I can, because it's telling me that I need to figure this out, and I want to walk around, but this stops me. So my interrogation, and I say interrogation because this is challenging me. It's saying, what the hell am I? And I have to answer that. And so I'm going in there and I'm trying to pick up clues, and I'm trying to, and I know who you are, so I know you're like an engineer. Your brain's like, so I'm trying to pick that, that rope and see where it lands, but it's now sort of a little easier to do so. Now
I would agree with what you're saying about it as an object for me. I mean, I can see that being resolved, but I think the big question is what those images are and how they're framed. It almost seems like there's two different works here that we put together. The whole, reading the text and looking at this, I get one read, but I can't put, and the idea that the triangle is a symbol for this or that means nothing. I can't access that. So it almost seems like, you have a work that's kind of sculptural, and then you have this work that's sort of about this process. And I don't think they're working together. I think they're two different things. And I think that's confirmed for me by the way the framing is slightly different in both of them, and the rather arbitrary relationship with this rectangle to this. They're really two different things. And I think the only thing the sculpture gives you in terms of the picture is the backlightedness. So yeah, I do think that's kind of an interesting eccentric thing. But I would start putting other images on it and just think about what that thing actually does with pictures. And I know you have the original plan that was set in there. I think that would make it look like the sculpture went to here rather than to here. Which is probably another part of the confusion. This just looks like another one of those.
Not
about change, then it should change too. It feels very static when this are thinking about you want this, it's all about evolution, but here it's quite fixed.
But I applaud the boldness of really going after into this territory, this territory that hasn't been plotted or mapped before. And so I encourage you to keep mapping it because you're trying to articulate this vision in your head, and so and I'm seeing one aspect of it. So to me, this is a process of the experimentation, of grand experimentation. So but it needs to be, for me, I use the word oblique. It was a little bleak for me because I could only get to it and then I hit a wall. And so but then I realized, wow, you were really taking a lot of risk, and what I responded to quite a bit was the amount of risk taking that you took.
I wonder if given what I understand the interest in that imagery to be, if video would be better for the imagery itself. Just another thought.
You can project on the surface, like if this is a frosted white glass, you could have little projectors under here projecting an image onto the surfaces, for example. And I got this little projector, it's like a little like a flip, those flips? And it's actually a projector and a camera. And it's kind of amazing, it looks like a phone, and it's a projector. So they're making them small and cheap these days.
Okay. Did you want, you have already said something about the presentation when we were talking about fabulous work. But did you want to follow through with that, or is that?
Well, I could. I thought it was pretty clean, and my only ding of the presentation was where these pieces move outside the border of the print, because it sounds, when it doesn't, it's like, oh, it's functioning, and I said, oh yeah, and then as I look, I can kind of live with that, but it's more difficult for me to live with this. And so I would like it to be be invisible and just function, but it's making itself apparent. So.
I think they're really interesting images. It's just the framing is quite interesting because it calls attention to, like by the time you're scanning all the way across. It's a kind of confusing space, but you get this sense of that environment and what it might mean to participate in it. And I love the McDonald's thing. I just think that. And actually, somebody at the opening asked me if you would collage that in, which is so incongruous, but it makes perfect sense as well. I think these places are really, really interesting and incredibly creepy. And if you ever looked at Annie Leib's pictures of 29 Palms, these guys are much more imaginative than the U.S. Marine Corps. They just sort of spray some Arabic on a hotel building and shit. Which makes it all the more troubling, in fact, that the kind of degree of realism for this play war. It's like, what do these people do next? It's interesting stuff.
Aside from what Mark was getting at, the sociological component, the way it reflects our culture and our warrior culture. Culture is, war is entertainment, war is pastime, war is creative pleasure, all this stuff. What's really odd is when you just glance really quickly at the work, it feels like it could be a beach scene or something because of the blues and the lights. So when you first come in and glance, the way the palette is sort of says recreation and soothing and all this stuff, and then when you get there, something else is happening. So I just wanted to bring out, so I was quite interested on how the color palette works to send a counter message to what's really going on. I like the way that shifted.
Seems like a nice way to conclude this idea that you've been working with that you wanted, and really kind of finishing off strong with this. Not that it's finished, but just happy to see it develop to this degree. The technique is really nice. Doing the grid composites to get just this hyper reality, almost like a level of detail to it. And I think that sort of matches just this aestheticizing of war, and that's why I think these people are better at it than maybe the military is, which is just thinking more practical terms of like, I just need to kill someone, but here is this aesthetics.
Right.
Form and function.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so kind of bringing like this, the digital camera and this hyper real kind of look to it is a nice strategy. Just in the same way that sometimes using your the old techniques, I can't remember what you were using, also give it interesting content. What were you using before? Like your collodion plate or plate? Yeah. That is something too. Here's just another way to kind of use your form to speak to the content. And I like how you're doing that. There's a couple places like it gets like this section of the image is soft for some reason. And it just kind of, it's disappointing after seeing how much resolution is possible. So I don't know what happened there. Doing these composites, you get a lot of distortion as you move the camera around. You might have gotten too much, and you had to stretch it or distort it. It blurred it out anyways.
Yeah.
So just that's just thing. I talked to already. Like I just like that they're not covered with the paintballs, because then it really makes it more ambiguous. I mean, most people didn't even really know it was a paintball space. So it really feels like you could really be in some landscape, like in the Middle East, or it might be a military training space, or it might be something like this, the paintball. And I like all those possibilities. I think some of the other ones I've seen from you is you see more of the fresh paint everywhere in the past. The framing, I'm really happy just the variety of framing, people finding their own solutions. I love seeing Nielsen frames come back in a little bit. I think they're just efficient and thin. They don't draw attention to themselves. Here, going with more contemporary like mounting style that works for these images. It gives them like a directness to it. And here, just finding something that works, given that these would be monstrously extensive and huge frames. And is that necessary right now for these? I just wish these were painted white.
The magnets.
Magnets are just, I just see 6 silver coins like on every image, and it's just distracting. But overall, I just like that you tried something like this. And I've seen them painted white, and it works.
And I'd like to speak of the dialogues that occur, because when you go from this work to Michelle's, you see the phallas, and then it becomes a gun. I mean, that's sort of a gangster pose. You shoot your wad, all this stuff about the violence. It's sort of the patriarchy. It's over here, and then you come back over here. My mind was relating these
just
two works.
The kind of cultural forces that work for forming our subjectivities is as active here as in what she's describing.
Right.
And over here too, this whole, these photos to a group.
I don't know if you guys know that, but I think it's worth saying that when Eric went to do this, he thought he was going to do something else, and they wouldn't let him. So these are sort of done more of an improvisational thing, But I think necessity is the mother of invention. It's like if you would have gotten to do what you wanted to do, perhaps you would have just done another iteration of what you'd already done. But here I think you found maybe that's something that's a little more appropriate to the specific, or maybe it's just that you were able to get at this subject in a more interesting way because of the fact somebody said no. That's all we got for this. Thank you, Eric. I really wish it came to the floor. I think that would. I'm not sure about the height, but if it came to the floor, it would be less distracting.
Yeah, bad curtain job.
Right.
But
because this becomes a part of the show.
Yeah.
It's like the face of this section.
Yeah. So do we want to go in here? Yeah.
You can't go away.
You stay over.
No, I'm totally good with it. Even make it. Yeah.
nice touch.
I don't like this idea.
We can't help it, it's in the gallery.
And you're gonna look
The
this
frame
way.
of the work is,
Okay.
you know, that's like Eric's magnets.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I want to check this out. I found that the sound level was really difficult, but it might have been because of the opening. It was just so loud out there, so I just want to see if I still feel that way. No, it was the noise. But I think I noticed that some people didn't listen very long. And I don't know if it was a lack of interest or in fact they just felt they couldn't hear it. It might be something to think about, you know, you can adjust that for them.
Yeah, bring it up for the opening and then bring it back down.
Once I plugged the headphones in, there was no control of the volume. So I don't know if there's a set volume that occurs when the headphones are plugged in.
So we'll investigate and find out how to solve that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, just since we're talking about the outer shell as we go in, and get an X-Acto blade and cut this properly. Because this becomes just it just says, it shows an attitude about it, and I think you want your attitude to be precise. Unless, of course, that is your attitude.
But it's not fine.
You know, what you were saying about the DVD player, I don't see that's as big an issue here with this imagery. What do you think?
It's stair-stepping.
Do you think?
Yeah, but there's not as many opportunities like
Okay.
blur
Yeah.
and stuff like this.
Okay.
But I just was throwing that out there for everyone
Yeah.
just to know that that's an opportunity.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, it's so kind of ambiguous and blurry at times. It's not as much.
I think you had 3 headphones.
I took one out because there was 2 in here and it got louder when I took out another one.
Yeah, just a subjective comment. I really don't know why, but I think this is a lot more engaging than the previous one, even though, I mean, it's a similar subject, it's somewhat of a similar approach, and I think it's the doubling. And the movement of the camera itself, like these passages, which contrast with that kind of really, you know, deep black and white line that we were just pointing at in terms of resolution. I think that works really well. Yeah, like that against the kind of moving camera idea and these shadows and that. It's just it's really strong relationship to the idea of the camera work itself.
It keeps throwing you off, you know, and I don't know how many times, I think I listened at least 3, but I didn't feel like it was looped. I felt like I didn't hear it end and begin again. It just kept...
It's like a Philip Glass piece.
No, but I felt like sort of in a free fall. And the only thing like that was, and then I told him what to do, or there was one statement at the end where you have the power and you have the control. And I think I really like that kind of, it wasn't I like the statement or the finality of that, or the insertion of your power. And that maybe I just wanted to experience that again, like how you took control of the situation, to turn the whole game around, whatever game it was that I was conceiving in my head. But it's made the piece more comprehensible. It's like, and then now I'm with that, then I listen more clearly the next time for you to get to that point. Then I listen to it, and each time I listen, I can start putting, on the skeleton, I can start putting bone, fat and muscle and skin and so forth, creating this body, which never got completed. Frankenstein never appeared, but at least it's not a thing, a bone. So,
Great metaphor.
Was there a loop within a loop in there? Like in terms of the text? Or no?
No.
Is there a part that repeats within a single?
Not in this piece. In the other one, yes.
Yeah, this is very close to the other one, I guess in terms of content, right? So it seems like you try to develop it, complicate it a little bit more. But I actually had the opposite feeling. I actually preferred the first one. Almost because the first one was so stripped down, I felt like it made me think about something other than the literal story you were telling. that it was not just about a girl, you know, being looked at by a guy. It became about me as a viewer looking at art, this video, maybe looking, sort of having a conversation back at me. And so the idea of or the suggestion of a girl and guy was so minimal and simple that it really allowed me to sort of move into this other one. Here, this is a much more sort of compelling world that you pull me into. And while your story, you know, your literal story might be more sort of complex in that way, it gives me less room to really start to think of this like object, me having a relationship with this object, and what do I want from this thing as I look at it? Why do I keep looking at it? And you know, what does it seem to always want from me? It's like sort of like maybe Vito Conchi's theme song piece, you know, that dialogue. Come on, just come here. I want to love you. You know? Here, like, don't go away. Don't leave me here alone. You know, he just keeps talking. And I felt like this piece has a little bit of that potential to get beyond the little the narrative. And I don't buy your statement. Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know if, like, that it's about repressed memories. I don't know. I know Mark sometimes doesn't like the, it's like about, something's about memory.
Oh, yeah, I have this thing about that.
Yeah, he's,
Because you were touching on that, but my interest in that was this idea that the whole thing might be bogus, as people have considered the phenomenon of repressed memory syndrome to be bogus as well, as basically a creation of media, a kind of desire to believe that that's possible, you know, as a way to think about the past, you know. And I was actually thinking of Mike Kelly's kind of works that superficially look like they're about that, but actually work against. That's why. So don't blame it on me.
When I went to the statement, I read it, and the statement stayed on the wall over there, and the piece stayed there.
Yeah.
I didn't try to, because I thought, oh, that's one thing, but I didn't bring it back to this. I considered it for a moment, but I liked the relationship that I had and the effect that the work had with me that was not biased.
Well, you know, I mean, writing these statements is a really good part of this thing that we're doing here as a learning experience. But in reality, some of these works require a lot more than others. And then, I often encounter works that think are better off. Like, just let me come in here and put those headphones on. Don't think about that stuff. Whereas, just one contrast, obviously, Fabiola's word statement is sort of an integral part of the work.
yeah.
And maybe we could say the same thing about Esteban as well, but we haven't gotten there yet. But so, everybody gets to do it, but in fact, it's not always helpful for the art. That's also something to think about in the future.
There's other, ways to arrange the videos on a wall. They could be in the corner. Well, this maybe like they have more dialogue with each other. Do you think of those things?
There was a lot of limitations while Haynes TVs, especially with the new gallery coordinator. A lot of things that he wouldn't let us do. So.
Oh, he's new on the job, so yeah.
So I was kind of
Flexing
forced to put him on stage or have him horizontally.
If you're, I know it all goes down in one day and you can't really get help to resolve it, but I know I would come bully him, for you.
He was the one who was trying to come in.
Yeah.
But it's good.
Yeah.
Oh, and
But I have a
Todd
lot of
stayed,
experience
and
in bullying.
what's that?
I have a lot of experience in
Yeah,
bullying.
you do. Let's send Mark after. Todd mentioned, like details like that. Yeah, and I'd love to see video artists start taking this frame more seriously. Like, there's ways to create boxes around it that go over it. There's other sort of viewing contraptions that can kind of fit over this that you can start to work with. Because this is an object, this is a frame, that's a choice. Can you imagine a photographer with a framed work who got a scratch on it or something and they just put a piece of white tape over their white frame? I mean, you would just laugh at it. It's just, so I think we just address this too casually and take it for granted that it's going to just be like this for video art.
Okay, we have
Headphones.
this is the only work in the show where what happened after it went up is what the work's about, rather than, I mean, the other work's sort of, I mean, yeah, there was a kind of viewer relationship in that, but this is a participatory thing, and it was unpredictable, of course, so, and I'm not sure I have any resolution of that. I mean, I'm looking at that board and just the kind of frivolity, if you will, of all that is really not as interesting as maybe the intention that's represented here in the machine itself. But I don't know how predictable that was finally. But I think you sort of encourage that with the crayons and all the other doodads. You encourage the kind of silliness to transpire, and the mats, for example. I thought I had talked you out of the props, but I guess I didn't.
I just want to have a discussion.
This-
You don't want to hear it.
This piece made a lot of people happy, actually. They really enjoyed it. But I would say that, to me, that doesn't mean it's a good piece. People love McDonald's. It's spread all over the world, but it doesn't mean it's good. People love what all the Facebooks and Instagrams, and it doesn't mean it's good. It's just appealing to the lowest common denominator of the masses. So I'm not going to sort of just buy into that as success, and I would hope that you would sort of question that as well. While you might be caught up with the thrill of people being excited by doing this, that's different from it being the kind of valuable artwork. And I do see a disconnect as well with this statement. Before I just jump on you too, I really would say I always appreciate that I don't know what I'm going to get from you when I see your work. You're always sort of breaking, from the format, breaking the rules, doing something that's pushing us in some way. And so that part of it I do actually think is strong, and I like and always appreciate in your work, and here we have it again. But, oh yeah, people just like to see themselves. I don't know if that needs to be encouraged. Is there a way we can try to create a critical dialogue about that instead of just like a celebration of the current contemporary narcissism or something?
I like the current contemporary narcissism. That's nice.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
When I came into the space and I read the piece, and then I looked at the object, I questioned it, about the materiality of the photograph and how part of your hypothesis about its vanishing or being replaced by this other thing. And then I thought, okay, but I'll open to it. And then of course I didn't know where this was going to go until I came a day or so. But then I could see people, sort of funny how they wrapped up their emotions and so they had it certainly had affect. But this table, I don't know if it worked to illuminate what you were doing. It certainly showed me artifacts, so illustrating things, but I don't think it, for myself, it did not bring more light to your hypothesis or your investigation or your idea. And for me, it felt like an afterthought. And I thought that the space might be better served without that table, just with this thing and whatever else you do. But I thought it was a bit overwrought with this table of stuff, because now I'm trying to make this connection. But you said that in words. I don't think you have to illustrate it. And then when I picked up the family albums, I went a couple times, but this is a different, family albums is different than this. And so they're two different, for me, they're two different photo languages or ways of preserving an image of oneself, two intimates. So
I think if you wanted to elaborate on the space and the idea of sort of support materials, and in lieu of that, maybe a kind of an exhibition of family pictures that span the material history of the medium up that ends with that. See? You go from the daguerreotype up to the SX70, and then you have this. And that would, rather than props, it would be a little bit more. It would like reinforce this. See, and maybe make it, and well, maybe take some of the fun away too. You know? I mean, it would still be certainly an enjoyable experience, but I don't think it would be reducible to that as much, you know?
Yeah, make them eat their carrots.
Another
metaphor.
Yeah. Well, or Velveeta and Gorgonzola.
By having this big old statement here, you're kind of telling us that that's what you want from the work. So that's kind of why I think our comments are guiding towards that.
And I think that this is absolutely essential to making it work however it does work. Because otherwise, what else distinguishes this from wherever else in our society you would find that booth? Actually, I don't know, but I'm imagining. I do know the Dodger games.
What used to be at the drugstore. That's as a kid.
Yeah,
that's
bus
where it was.
stations and
Yeah.
wherever subway stations a lot in Europe still, because you always need these ID cards for your passes and stuff, or your ID photos, rather.
Yeah, because without it, it seems like people. No, can't do it. I always try and say something I can't quite articulate. Back up from that.
I had the sense that you anticipated a lot more than that when we talked, or is this satisfactory to you in that regard in terms of the level of participation? I was just curious about that.
Actually, yeah, that's about what I expected, just from what I know of how many people actually visit the galleries.
Okay.
You know, and then the amount of time that would be here. So that's, otherwise I would have gone, probably covered up the whole board and let people, or the whole wall.
Something came to me, mixed messages. There's two messages in the work. One is a certain kind of frivolity and encouragement of selfies and the whole thing, which is actually aided by your props, your colored pens, your arts and crafts type of supplemental material. And then the other is the dialogue from your statement, and then what you're trying to allude over here. And so I think what your job is to do is to either separate the two or to see how they can complement each other, or if in fact they cannot complement each other. But there's two trains in the room.
I also wonder, like, so what? Physical photographs are going away. So what? I don't know. I'm not gonna.
That's not. You know, that's a subjective.
Everything we're saying is subjective.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you don't agree with me. That's fine. But, and I'm not saying even take this opinion. I'm actually just wondering, like, why does it matter? Maybe because we grew up with something and like we want it that way. And when we see that the new generation doesn't value what we value, we get upset. But really, I mean, is that enough? So it just feels a little bit nostalgic, just like the physical photograph. Like, yeah, like I'm not convinced why it's important here. And obviously, it seems like most people in the world are also not convinced that it's that important. So it's just about making the case. I think Mark's idea of like this more historical thing was a good one. I don't know if it's a final solution, but just thinking like that might help. Because this is already throwaway. This is the throwaway physical photograph. This is not like precious in any way.
Yeah.
It is.
There's a contradiction there in the material itself.
Yeah, you talk about the immediacy of this digital age. You know, this is immediacy. Like I go in there and I instantly get something, and it just lends itself right to just also passing from us quickly as it came. So there's sort of like the lasting image, and then there's the quick image to be consumed, and it's not just about it being physical or not physical. It's about sort of the intention of why it's produced, how it's produced, for what context. So here you seem to fall right into the trap you're trying to get out of. But also I just wonder, you know, like, yeah, nostalgia. Is it just nostalgia?
Yeah.
And if so, is that really a valuable argument or interesting argument?
Well, it's an argument we don't have time for because that introduces the whole problematics of identity formation through material culture. And that's not a 30-second conversation. So I'm going to pull the plug on that.
What about 30 seconds to take a group picture?
I don't want to bang.
Oh, can I just say, this show, I was really impressed just coming in to the show. It just seems well laid out, dealing with some difficult things. We have lots of variety of work. Each person finding their unique voice. I was impressed, actually.
I have to say.
Yeah, very good. Congratulations, everybody. Did you record that too?
Yeah.
Okay, open the doors, let the mobs in.